She got into the wrong car on the worst night of her life. And the man inside would change everything. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy. The rain was coming down in sheets, turning the Chicago streets into rivers of reflected light. Clara Bennett burst through the doors of Millionaire, one of the city's most pretentious restaurants, tears streaming down her face and mixing with the rain. She didn't care that her mascara was ruined. She didn't care that her carefully curled hair was plastered to her face. She didn't care that the little black dress she'd bought specifically for tonight was getting soaked. All she cared about was getting as far away from that restaurant as humanly possible. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone. The battery icon glowed red. 2%. Of course her phone was dying. Because why would anything go right on this disaster of an evening? She had already ordered a rideshare before dinner, scheduled to pick her up at 9:30. It was 9:27 now. Black sedan, license plate ending in 7X. Clara squinted through the rain at the line of cars waiting along the curb. There. A sleek black car, tinted windows, plate ending in 7X. Thank God. She yanked open the back door and threw herself inside, slamming it behind her. The sudden silence was jarring after the chaos of the storm. "You would not believe the night I've had," Clara announced, not even looking up as she fumbled with her soaking wet purse. I knew blind dates were risky. Everyone knows blind dates are risky, but this was a new level of catastrophe. She was ranting now, the words pouring out of her like the rain outside. First, he shows up 20 minutes late, no apology, not even a text. Just strolls in like I should be grateful he bothered to appear at all. She found a tissue in her purse and started dabbing at her ruined makeup. Then he spends the entire appetizer course talking about his cryptocurrency portfolio, the entire course. I didn't even know there was that much to say about Bitcoin. Apparently there is. 2 hours worth. She kicked off her heels, which were soaked through. And the whole time he's not asking me a single question, not one. I could have been a serial killer for all he knew. I could have been literally anyone. But no. He's too busy explaining blockchain to notice I'm dying of boredom. She finally looked up, ready to ask the driver to turn up the heat, and froze. Because there was no driver. Well, there was a driver. Up front, behind a privacy partition. But that wasn't what made her freeze. What made her freeze was the man sitting next to her in the back seat. He was watching her with an expression somewhere between shock and amusement. Dark hair, slightly disheveled. Sharp jaw. Eyes that were either blue or gray, she couldn't tell in the dim light. He was wearing a suit that looked like it cost more than her monthly rent, and he was holding a glass of what appeared to be very expensive whiskey. Clara's brain short-circuited. "You're not my Uber," she said stupidly. "I am not," the man agreed. His voice was deep, cultured, with a hint of laughter in it. Oh God, oh no, oh no, no, no. Clara's hands flew to her face. "This isn't happening. This is not happening." "I'm afraid it is." "Why didn't you say something?" Clara's voice came out as a squeak. "You didn't really give me a chance." He took a sip of his whiskey, still watching her with that infuriating, almost smile. "You were very committed to your story about the cryptocurrency enthusiast." Clara wanted the earth to swallow her whole. She wanted to dissolve into the leather seats and cease to exist. "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. I thought you were my rideshare. The car looked the same. The plate ended in 7X. I just assumed—" 7Y, the man corrected. "What?" "The plate ends in 7Y, not 7X. Clara closed her eyes. Of course it did. Of course she had made this mistake because she couldn't tell the difference between an X and a Y in the rain. "I'm going to leave now," she announced, reaching for the door handle. I'm going to get out of your extremely expensive car and we're both going to pretend this never happened. And I'm going to die of embarrassment somewhere in the rain. Good night. Wait. Something in his voice made her pause. It's pouring out there, he said. And your phone is clearly dead or dying. At least let me give you a ride home. Clara stared at him. I don't get in cars with strangers. He raised an eyebrow. You literally just did. That was an accident. I didn't intentionally get in a car with a stranger. There's a difference. Is there? Yes, one is an honest mistake and the other is a potential true crime podcast waiting to happen. The man laughed. Actually laughed. It was a warm sound, genuine and unexpected. I promise I'm not planning to murder you, he said. I'm Sebastian Cross. And you are? Leaving, Clara said firmly. That's an unusual name. Despite herself, Clara felt the corner of her mouth twitch. Clara Bennett. Clara? He seemed to taste the name. Well, Clara, I have a proposition for you. If this is some kind of weird rich person thing, I'm really not interested. Nothing weird, just practical. He gestured toward the window where the rain was still hammering down. Let me give you a ride home. You're already in the car, you're soaking wet, your phone is dead. And I was just sitting here feeling sorry for myself before you burst in with the most entertaining story I've heard in months. Clara hesitated. He had a point. Her phone was definitely dead now. The rain wasn't letting up, and she really didn't want to go back out there. How do I know you're not a serial killer? She asked suspiciously. Sebastian considered this. I suppose you don't. But if it helps, my driver Marcus is right up front. He's been with my family for 15 years. He's very protective. If I tried anything nefarious, he'd probably throw me out of my own car. Clara glanced toward the privacy partition. She could see the outline of a broad-shouldered man in the driver's seat. Also, Sebastian continued, I'm fairly well known. If I murdered you, people would notice. Well known how? Are you famous? In certain circles. That's very vague and not at all reassuring. Sebastian smiled. It was a nice smile, she noticed reluctantly, the kind that crinkled the corners of his eyes. I'm a tech investor. Boring stuff. Nothing that would interest someone who clearly has more exciting problems to deal with. Clara sighed. She was exhausted. Her feet hurt. Her dress was ruined. And this man, despite being a complete stranger, seemed more genuinely interested in her than her actual date had been all evening. Fine, she said, but if you murder me, I'm going to haunt you forever. Noted. Sebastian leaned forward and tapped on the partition. It lowered silently. Marcus, we have a guest. Miss Bennett needs a ride home. The driver turned slightly. He was an older black man with kind eyes and a skeptical expression. He looked at Clara, then at Sebastian, then back at Clara. You okay, miss? Marcus asked, clearly offering her an out. I think so, Clara said, unless your boss is a secret murderer. Marcus's expression didn't change. He's not. Too lazy. Murders require effort. Clara laughed despite herself. Okay. Then yes, I'm okay. She gave Marcus her address, and the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. For a moment, they rode in silence. Clara became acutely aware of how ridiculous she must look. Mascara smeared, hair dripping, dress clinging to her in ways that were definitely not flattering. So, Sebastian said, breaking the silence. The cryptocurrency enthusiast. Tell me more. Clara groaned. I've already humiliated myself enough for one evening. Humor me. My night was incredibly boring before you arrived. She looked at him sideways. He seemed genuinely curious, not mocking, not condescending. Just interested. His name was Bradley, Clara began reluctantly. which should have been my first red flag. No offense to any Bradleys out there, but this one was a piece of work. What does Bradley do besides bore women to death with cryptocurrency? He's a disruptor. Clara made air quotes. He disrupts things. I'm still not entirely sure what that means, but he said it about 50 times. Sebastian winced. That's a lot of disruption, right? And the whole time he's talking, he's not eating anything, just pushing food around his plate, like eating is beneath him. Meanwhile, I'm starving because I skipped lunch, but I feel weird eating in front of someone who's clearly judging every bite I take. He judged you for eating? Oh, it gets worse. Clara was warming to her story now, the humiliation fading as the absurdity of it all became clearer. At the end of dinner, he looks at me and says, "You know, you'd be really pretty if you lost a few pounds." Sebastian's expression shifted. The amusement was gone, replaced by something harder. He said that? Verbatim. And then he suggested we hit the gym together before our second date. Like there was going to be a second date. Like I was going to voluntarily spend more time with someone who thinks body shaming is a valid flirting strategy. What did you do? Clara smiled grimly. I stood up, picked up his glass of very expensive wine and poured it directly into his lap. Sebastian's eyebrows shot up. You didn't? I did. And then I said, you know you'd be really attractive if you weren't such a colossal asshole. And then I left. There was a beat of silence. Then Sebastian burst out laughing. It was a real laugh, deep and unrestrained. Not the polite chuckle of someone humoring a story, but genuine amusement. That, he said when he'd recovered, is the best thing I've heard in months. Clara found herself smiling too. It felt pretty good, honestly, until I got outside and realized I'd just made a scene in one of the nicest restaurants in the city and my phone was dying and I was about to be stranded in a rainstorm. And then you got in a stranger's car. And then I got in a stranger's car, Clara agreed. Which brings us to now, the thrilling conclusion of the worst date in history. The car had stopped. Clara looked out the window and realized they were in front of her building, a modest apartment complex in a neighborhood that was charitably described as up and coming. This is me, she said, suddenly awkward again. It was nice meeting you, Clara Bennett. Sebastian's voice was warm. I'm sorry your date was terrible, but I'm grateful for the wrong car. Clara hesitated with her hand on the door. There was something about this man, something she couldn't quite identify. He was clearly wealthy, clearly powerful, but there was a loneliness in his eyes that felt familiar. Thank you for the ride, she said, and for not being a murderer. You're welcome, on both counts. She started to open the door, then stopped. Can I ask you something? Anything. You said you were feeling sorry for yourself before I got in. Why? Sebastian was quiet for a moment. The rain continued to pound against the windows. I was supposed to have dinner tonight, he said finally, with a woman my mother wanted me to meet, the daughter of a business associate, beautiful, accomplished, perfect on paper. What happened? I couldn't make myself go. He stared out the window at the rain. I've been on 100 of those dinners. They're all the same. The women are always interested in Sebastian Cross, the investor, the name, the bank account. None of them have ever been interested in me. Clara felt something shift in her chest. This man, with his expensive suit and his luxury car, was just as lonely as she was. Maybe you're meeting the wrong women, she said softly. Maybe I am. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Clara didn't know what it was, but it made her heart beat faster. Good night, Sebastian, she said. Good night, Clara. She got out of the car and ran through the rain to her building's entrance. When she turned back, the black sedan was still there, a darker shadow in the downpour. Then it pulled away, disappearing into the night. Clara stood in the lobby for a long moment, dripping onto the tile floor, trying to process what had just happened. She had gotten into a stranger's car, ranted about her terrible date, learned his name was Sebastian, and felt more connected to him in 20 minutes than she had to Bradley in 2 hours. It was insane. It was probably nothing. She would never see him again. Clara took the elevator to her 4th-floor apartment, changed out of her ruined dress, and collapsed onto her bed. Her roommate Denise wasn't home yet. The apartment was quiet except for the rain against the windows. She plugged in her phone and waited for it to charge. When it finally flickered to life, she had 3 text messages. The first was from Denise. "How's the date? Details." The second was from her friend Marcus at the bakery. "Don't forget your opening tomorrow, 5 a.m. Sorry." The third was from an unknown number. Clara frowned and opened it. "I hope this isn't too forward, but I can't stop thinking about your rant. Dinner tomorrow? The man whose car you stole." Clara stared at the screen. Her heart was pounding. He had asked for her number. When? She didn't remember giving it to him. She must have during the ride, but her memory was a blur of embarrassment and rain in those gray-blue eyes. She started typing a response, then deleted it. Started again. Deleted again. What was she supposed to say? "Yes, strange billionaire, I would love to have dinner with you." No, that was crazy. She didn't even know who he was. Clara opened a browser and typed Sebastian Cross Chicago. The results made her drop her phone. Sebastian Cross, CEO of Cross Ventures. Net worth, $4.2 billion, one of the most eligible bachelors in America. Photos of him at galas, charity events, business conferences. Photos of him with a stunning blonde woman who was identified as his ex-fiancée, Vanessa Aldridge. Clara scrolled through article after article, her stomach sinking with each one. This was not just some rich guy. This was one of the richest people in the entire country. This was someone who dated models and socialites and probably had never set foot in a neighborhood like hers. And she had burst into his car, complained about her date, and told him she would haunt him if he murdered her. Clara buried her face in her hands. She was still sitting there when Denise came home an hour later. "Clara, what are you doing sitting in the dark? How was the—" Denise stopped. "Why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" "I got in the wrong car," Clara said weakly. "What?" "After my date. I got in the wrong car. I thought it was my Uber, but it wasn't. It was a billionaire." Denise stared at her. "You're going to have to start from the beginning." Clara told her everything. The disastrous date with Bradley, the rain, the wrong car, Sebastian Cross, the ride home, the text message. By the end, Denise was sitting on the bed beside her, scrolling through photos of Sebastian on her phone. "Clara," Denise said slowly. "Clara, this man is gorgeous. This man is a billionaire. This man asked you to dinner." "I know. What's the problem?" Clara gestured at herself. "Look at me. I'm a mess. I work in a bakery. I live in a 4th-floor walk-up with a roommate. Men like him don't date women like me." "He asked you out," Denise pointed out, "after you hijacked his car and ranted at him for 20 minutes. That means he likes the real you, not some polished fake version. He was probably just being polite. Billionaires don't text random women asking them to dinner out of politeness." Denise grabbed Clara's shoulders. "So this is fate, Clara, destiny, the universe throwing you a bone after that nightmare with Bradley. Or it's a terrible idea that's going to end in humiliation. One way to find out." Clara looked at her phone, at the message that was still waiting for a response. "I can't," she said. "I can't go to dinner with a billionaire. I don't own anything fancy enough. I don't know which fork to use. I'll say something stupid and embarrass myself and—" "You already said stupid things. Denise interrupted. And he still asked you out. Clara, when is the last time something exciting happened to you? Clara was quiet. The answer was never. Nothing exciting ever happened to her. She worked, she paid bills, she survived. That was her life. Just say yes, Denise urged. What's the worst that could happen? Clara looked at the phone, at the message from the man with the sad eyes and the warm laugh. What's the worst that could happen? She typed, I'm not sure stole is accurate. It was more of an accidental carjacking, but yes to dinner, when and where. The response came almost immediately. Tomorrow 7 p.m. I'll pick you up, same car. Try not to steal it this time. Clara laughed despite herself. She typed back, no promises. Then she put down her phone and looked at Denise. I have a date with a billionaire tomorrow, she said, and I have absolutely nothing to wear. Denise grinned. Good thing I love a challenge. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Sebastian Cross, the way he'd laughed at her story, the sadness in his eyes when he talked about the women his mother wanted him to meet, the way he'd said her name, like he was tasting something new and unexpected. It was probably nothing. He was probably just bored. Trolla. Tomorrow he would come to his senses and cancel. But a small part of her, a part she'd thought had died along with her romantic hopes years ago, flickered with something that felt dangerously like hope. Maybe, just maybe, the worst night of her life was about to lead to the best thing that had ever happened to her. Or maybe she was about to make an even bigger fool of herself than she already had. Either way, Clara Bennett was getting in that car again tomorrow. And this time, she was doing it on purpose. Across the city in a penthouse that overlooked Lake Michigan, Sebastian Cross stood at his window with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He couldn't stop smiling. Marcus had driven him home in silence, but Sebastian had seen the older man's expression in the rearview mirror. Surprised, almost pleased. Who was she, sir? Marcus had finally asked as they pulled into the underground garage. I have no idea, Sebastian had replied, but I intend to find out. Now, alone in his massive apartment, Sebastian replayed the evening in his mind. Clara Bennett, soaking wet and furious, bursting into his car and launching into a tirade about cryptocurrency and terrible dates. She had no idea who he was. She had treated him like a normal person. She had threatened to haunt him. When was the last time anyone had been that real with him? He couldn't remember. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. You missed dinner with Camille. She was very disappointed. We need to discuss this tomorrow. Sebastian ignored it. Another text, this one from his ex-fiancée, Vanessa. Heard you stood up the Ashford girl. Trouble in paradise? Call me. We should talk. He ignored that one too. Instead, he looked at the message thread with Clara, at her response agreeing to dinner, at the little joke about accidental carjacking. She was funny, quick, unimpressed by his money, everything that everyone in his world was not. Sebastian finished his whiskey and set down the glass. Tomorrow he would take Clara Bennett to dinner. Not to some overpriced restaurant where everyone would recognize him and the paparazzi would be waiting. Somewhere real, somewhere she might actually enjoy. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Sebastian Cross was looking forward to something. And it had all started because a rain-soaked pastry chef got into the wrong car. What did you think of Clara and Sebastian's unexpected meeting? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories. Clara woke up the next morning to the sound of her alarm screaming at 4:30 a.m. For a moment she lay in bed, convinced the previous night had been a dream. Then she checked her phone. The text thread with Sebastian was still there. The dinner was still happening. In approximately 14 hours, she would be getting into a billionaire's car on some purpose. Clara groaned and dragged herself out of bed. Sweet Surrender Bakery was a 20-minute walk from her apartment. Clara made the trek in the pre-dawn darkness, the streets quiet except for the occasional delivery truck. The rain had stopped overnight, leaving the city washed clean and glistening under the streetlights. The bakery was her sanctuary. A small storefront wedged between a laundromat and a nail salon, it wasn't much to look at from the outside. But inside, it smelled like heaven. Butter and sugar and yeast and possibility. Mrs. Antonelli was already there when Clara arrived, her silver hair tucked under a flour-dusted bandana. "You're late," the old woman said without turning around. "I'm 3 minutes early. For me, that's late." Mrs. Antonelli finally looked at her and frowned. "You look terrible. What happened?" "Long night." Clara tied on her apron and started pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. "Bad date." "Ah," Mrs. Antonelli nodded sagely. "Men are pigs." This one was definitely a pig. Was he at least handsome? Clara thought about Bradley with his carefully styled hair and his smug smile. Then she thought about Sebastian with his rumpled elegance and his sad eyes. "The date wasn't handsome," she said carefully. But something else happened after. Mrs. Antonelli raised an eyebrow. The old woman had a sixth sense for gossip. "I got in the wrong car," Clara admitted. "Thought it was my rideshare. It wasn't." "Whose car was it?" "A man named Sebastian Cross." Mrs. Antonelli's hands stilled on the dough she was kneading. "Sebastian Cross? The Sebastian Cross? You know him?" "Everyone knows him, child. He's one of the richest men in the country." Mrs. Antonelli turned to face her fully. "What happened?" Clara told her the whole story. The rant, the ride home, the text message, the date tonight. By the end, Mrs. Antonelli was grinning. "This is wonderful. Finally, something good happens to you." "It's not wonderful," Clara protested. "It's terrifying. I don't belong in his world. I'm going to embarrass myself." "Nonsense." Mrs. Antonelli waved a flour-covered hand. "You are smart, beautiful, talented. Any man would be lucky to have you. Mrs. A, he's a billionaire. He probably dates supermodels." "So? Supermodels can't make a croissant like you can." Mrs. Antonelli pointed at her. "You go on this date. You be yourself. And if he doesn't appreciate you, he's a fool." Clara wanted to believe her, but the knot of anxiety in her stomach wouldn't go away. The morning rush kept her busy. Clara lost herself in the familiar rhythm of baking, rolling dough, piping cream, decorating cakes. This was what she was good at. This was where she belonged. By noon, she had almost convinced herself that she could do this. Then Denise showed up with 3 shopping bags and a manic gleam in her eye. "I called in sick to work," Denise announced, dumping the bags on the bakery counter. "We have 6 hours to make you look like someone who belongs on the arm of a billionaire." "Denise, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did. This is literally the most exciting thing that has ever happened to either of us." Denise started pulling clothes out of the bags. "I borrowed some things from my sister. She's your size. And I stopped by that consignment shop on Michigan Avenue. Look at this dress." She held up a deep green wrap dress that looked like it cost more than Clara's weekly paycheck. "It was marked down," Denise said quickly, "and it brings out your eyes. Try it on." Clara looked at Mrs. Antonelli for help, but the old woman just smiled and shooed her toward the back room. An hour later, Clara barely recognized herself. The green dress fit perfectly, hugging her curves in all the right places. Denise had done her makeup, subtle but sophisticated. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Antonelli said, her eyes suspiciously bright. "You look hot," Denise corrected. "That billionaire isn't going to know what hit him." Clara stared at her reflection in the small bathroom mirror. She did look good. Different. Like someone who might actually belong in Sebastian Cross's world. But she still felt like Clara Bennett, pastry chef, daughter of nobody special, drowning in debt and barely keeping her head above water. She hoped that would be enough. At exactly 7 p.m., the black sedan pulled up in front of Clara's building. She was waiting in the lobby, too nervous to wait in her apartment. When she saw the car, her heart started pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. The back door opened and Sebastian stepped out. He was wearing dark jeans and a simple black sweater. No suit tonight. He looked more relaxed than he had the night before, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. "You came," he said, as if he hadn't quite believed she would. "I said I would. People say a lot of things they don't mean." Clara heard something in his voice, a weariness that didn't match his smile. "I meant it," she said simply. Sebastian opened the car door for her. As she slid inside, she noticed that the partition between the front and back seats was up. Marcus was driving again, but they had privacy. "So," Clara said as the car pulled away from the curb. "Where are we going? Some fancy restaurant where I won't know which fork to use?" Sebastian smiled. "Not exactly." 20 minutes later, the car stopped in front of a tiny restaurant in a neighborhood Clara didn't recognize. The sign above the door read, "Taqueria Elena," in faded letters. Clara looked at Sebastian, confused. "Best tacos in Chicago," he said. "My driver Marcus introduced me to this place years ago. I've been coming ever since." "You eat tacos?" "I eat food, Clara. I'm not an alien." She laughed, some of her nervousness fading. "I just expected, I don't know, crystal chandeliers, a wine list the size of a novel, waiters who judge you for ordering the wrong thing. I get enough of that at business dinners." Sebastian held open the restaurant door. "Tonight I wanted something real." The taqueria was small and crowded, with mismatched chairs and a TV playing a soccer game in the corner. The smell of grilled meat and fresh cilantro filled the air. An older woman behind the counter looked up when they entered, and her face broke into a wide smile. "Sebastian, mi amor!" She came around the counter and enveloped him in a hug. "It's been too long." "I know, Elena. I'm sorry. Work has been crazy." "Work, work, always work." Elena noticed Clara and her eyes widened. "And who is this beautiful woman?" "This is Clara, this is Elena. She makes the best carnitas you'll ever taste." Elena took Clara's hands in hers, studying her face. "You have kind eyes. Are you kind to our Sebastian?" "We just met," Clara said, flustered. "I accidentally got into his car." Elena threw her head back and laughed. "That's the best way to meet someone. Fate has a sense of humor." She patted Clara's cheek. "Sit, sit. I'll bring you something special." They settled into a corner booth. The leather was cracked and the table wobbled slightly. But Clara felt more comfortable here than she would have in any fancy restaurant. "She seems to know you well," Clara observed. "Elena's been feeding me since I was 22. I used to come here when I was first starting out, before I had any money. She'd let me sit in the corner and work for hours, and she'd bring me food even when I couldn't afford to pay." Sebastian's expression softened. "When I finally made it, I tried to repay her. She refused, said friendship isn't something you can buy." Clara felt her heart squeeze. This was not the cold billionaire the tabloids portrayed. This was someone real. Elena returned with 2 enormous plates of tacos plus chips, guacamole, and horchata. Clara's eyes widened. "This is enough food for 6 people. Elena thinks everyone is too skinny." Sebastian picked up a taco. "Don't argue, just eat." Clara took a bite and nearly moaned. The meat was perfectly seasoned. The salsa had just the right amount of heat, and the tortilla was fresh and soft. "Oh my God," she said with her mouth full. This is amazing, Sebastian grinned. Told you. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Clara noticed that Sebastian seemed more relaxed here than he had in his own car. The tension in his shoulders had eased. He was actually smiling. So, she said, reaching for another taco. Tell me about yourself. The real stuff, not the stuff I could read on Wikipedia. Sebastian raised an eyebrow. You Googled me? My roommate Googled you. I was too scared to look. He laughed. Fair enough. What do you want to know? Everything. Start from the beginning. Sebastian was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. I was born into money, he said finally. My family has been wealthy for generations. Old money, the kind that comes with expectations and obligations and a very specific idea of what your life should look like. That sounds suffocating. It was, is. He took a sip of his horchata. My father died when I was 18. Heart attack. Totally unexpected. He was 52. I'm so sorry. Sebastian shrugged, but Clara could see the old pain in his eyes. After he died, my mother became more controlling. She decided that I needed to uphold the family legacy, make the right connections, marry the right person, produce the right heirs. The right person meaning someone rich? Rich, beautiful, connected. Someone who would look good at charity galas and produce photogenic children. His voice was bitter. I tried to go along with it for a while. I dated the women she approved of. I went to the events. I played the part. What happened? I got engaged. Sebastian's jaw tightened. Her name was Vanessa. She was everything my mother wanted, beautiful, sophisticated, from the right family. Clara remembered the photos she'd seen online, the stunning blonde on Sebastian's arm. We were together for 2 years. I thought I loved her. I thought she loved me. He let out a humorless laugh. Turns out she was more interested in the cross name than in me. I found out she'd been sleeping with one of my business partners for most of our relationship. Oh, Sebastian, the worst part wasn't the cheating. It was realizing that everything had been a performance, every I love you, every romantic gesture. She was playing a role and I was too blind to see it. Clara reached across the table and took his hand. It was an impulse, but it felt right. That's awful. I'm so sorry. Sebastian looked at their joined hands, then up at her face. After Vanessa, I stopped believing that anyone could want me for me. Everyone wants something, money, connections, status. I've become very good at figuring out what people's angle is. So what's my angle? Clara asked quietly. That's the thing. Sebastian's eyes searched hers. I can't figure it out. You got in my car by accident. You had no idea who I was. You threatened to haunt me. And when I asked you to dinner, you almost said no. I was terrified. Why? Because you're you. Clara gestured vaguely. You're Sebastian Cross. You're worth billions of dollars. You could have anyone in the world. Why would you want to have dinner with a pastry chef who lives in a 4th-floor walk-up? Sebastian's expression softened. Because you're the first person in years who's treated me like a human being instead of a bank account. They stared at each other across the table. Something shifted between them. Clara felt it like a physical thing, a connection forming that hadn't existed before. Tell me about you, Sebastian said. The real stuff. Clara took a deep breath. My story isn't as dramatic as yours. I grew up in a small town in Indiana. My mom was a school teacher. My dad. She hesitated. My dad left when I was 15. He had some problems, made some bad choices. I haven't spoken to him in 14 years. I'm sorry. It's okay. We were better off without him. Clara picked at a tortilla chip. My mom raised me on her own. She worked 2 jobs to put me through culinary school. She was my biggest supporter. Was? Clara's throat tightened. She passed away 2 years ago, cancer. It was quick. 6 months from diagnosis to... She couldn't finish the sentence. Sebastian squeezed her hand. I'm so sorry, Clara. The medical bills were... Clara shook her head. Even with insurance, it was devastating. I'm still paying them off. That's why I work at the bakery. Mrs. Antonelli gives me extra shifts, lets me pick up whatever hours I can. What's your dream? Sebastian asked. If money wasn't an issue, what would you do? Clara smiled sadly. I'd open my own bakery, something small and cozy where I could make the recipes my mom taught me. She was an amazing baker. Apple pie, cinnamon rolls, this honey lavender eclair that's just... She kissed her fingers. Perfection. You make eclairs? I make everything, breads, pastries, cakes. It's what I love. Clara's eyes lit up when she talked about baking. There's something magical about taking raw ingredients and turning them into something beautiful. Something that makes people happy. Sebastian was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You're extraordinary, you know that? Clara laughed uncomfortably. I'm really not. You are. You've been through hell and you're still fighting, still dreaming, still showing up every day at 5 a.m. to make other people's days a little sweeter. He leaned forward. That's not ordinary, Clara. That's remarkable. Clara didn't know what to say. No one had ever seen her like this before. Most people looked at her and saw a struggling pastry chef with flour in her hair and bags under her eyes. Sebastian looked at her like she was something precious. Thank you, she whispered. They talked for hours. The taqueria emptied around them, but Elena didn't seem to mind. She kept bringing them chips and refilling their drinks, winking at Clara whenever she caught her eye. Sebastian told her about his work, about the companies he invested in, about the pressure of managing a fortune that had existed for generations. Clara told him about the bakery, about Mrs. Antonelli, about her dreams of opening her own place someday. By the time they finally left, it was nearly midnight. The city had quieted, the streets empty and peaceful. Marcus was waiting with the car, but Sebastian didn't make a move toward it. Walk with me? He asked. They strolled down the sidewalk, not touching but close enough that their shoulders occasionally brushed. The night air was cool but not cold, and the stars were visible above the city lights. I had a really good time tonight, Clara said. Me too. Sebastian stopped, walking, and turned to face her. Clara, I know this is fast. I know we just met. But I haven't felt this way, and I don't know if I've ever felt this way. Clara's heart was racing. Sebastian, I don't want to scare you off. I know my life is complicated. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is a bad idea. He took her hands in his. But I'd really like to see you again. Clara looked up at him, at this beautiful broken man who had somehow seen her, really seen her in a way no one else ever had. I'd like that too, she said. Sebastian's smile was like the sun coming out after a storm. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. She didn't want to. The kiss was soft and sweet, tasting faintly of lime and cilantro from the tacos. Clara felt it all the way down to her toes. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. I should get you home, Sebastian said reluctantly. You have to be at the bakery in 4.5 hours, Clara groaned. Oh God, I'm going to be exhausted tomorrow. Worth it? She grinned at him. Worth it. Marcus drove her home. This time, Sebastian came up to the lobby door with her. Thank you for tonight, Clara said. For the tacos, for telling me about yourself, for everything. Thank you for getting in the wrong car. She laughed. I'm never going to live that down, am I? Never. Sebastian kissed her forehead. Good night, Clara. Good night, Sebastian. She watched him walk back to the car, then floated up to her apartment in a daze. Denise was waiting on the couch, barely containing her excitement. "Well?" Clara couldn't stop smiling. "He took me to a taqueria." "A taqueria? That's it? It was the best date I've ever been on." Clara collapsed onto the couch beside her roommate. "Denise, I think I really like him." "Of course you do. He's a billionaire." "It's not about the money." Clara hugged a pillow to her chest. "He's kind, and funny, and sad in this way that makes me want to wrap him in a blanket and protect him from the world." Denise raised an eyebrow. "You want to protect the billionaire?" "I know it sounds crazy. It sounds like you're falling for him." Clara was quiet for a moment. "Maybe I am." Over the next 3 weeks, Clara and Sebastian were nearly inseparable. He showed up at the bakery every morning with coffee, staying until the breakfast rush forced Clara to actually work. She taught him how to knead dough, how to pipe frosting, how to tell when bread was properly proofed. He was terrible at all of it, but he tried so hard that Clara couldn't help but laugh. "You're supposed to fold the dough, not punch it," she said, watching him attack a ball of pastry like it had personally offended him. "I'm folding." "You're assaulting it." Sebastian looked at his flour-covered hands and grinned. "Maybe I'm better suited to eating the results than making them." Mrs. Antonelli adored him. She fussed over him, like he was her own grandson, forcing him to eat samples of everything and interrogating him about his intentions toward Clara. "You break her heart. I break your legs," the old woman said sweetly, handing him a freshly baked cannoli. "Yes, ma'am," Sebastian replied seriously. In the evenings, they would go out, sometimes to fancy restaurants, but more often to places like Elena's Taqueria, hole-in-the-wall pizza joints, a tiny ramen shop in Chinatown, a food truck that made the best Korean tacos Clara had ever tasted. Sebastian seemed to know every hidden gem in the city, and he delighted in watching Clara experience them. "You eat like someone who actually enjoys food," he observed one night, watching her demolish a plate of dumplings. "Is there another way to eat?" "You'd be surprised. Most of the women I've dated pick at their food like birds. They're always on some diet or another." Clara snorted. "I work in a bakery. I taste things for a living. If I tried to diet, I'd last about 3 hours. Sebastian reached across the table and wiped a smear of sauce from the corner of her mouth. "I love that about you." Clara's heart flipped. He said things like that so easily, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She was falling for him, hard, and it terrified her. One evening, Sebastian brought her to his penthouse. Clara had been curious about where he lived, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality. The apartment occupied the entire top floor of one of Chicago's tallest buildings. The living room alone was bigger than her entire apartment. "This is..." Clara turned in a slow circle, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern art on the walls, the furniture that probably cost more than her car. "A lot." Sebastian looked almost embarrassed. "I know. It's excessive. You could fit my entire building in here. The view is nice." He led her to the windows, the city spread out below them, a glittering carpet of lights. Clara had to admit it was breathtaking, but it was also cold, impersonal. The apartment looked like a magazine spread, not a home. "Do you actually live here?" she asked. "Or is this just where you sleep?" Sebastian was quiet for a moment. "I used to try to make it feel like home. When Vanessa and I were together, we talked about redecorating, making it warmer. Then," he shrugged, "after we broke up, I stopped caring." Clara looked around with new eyes. She saw the emptiness now, the lack of personal touches, no photographs, no mementos, nothing that said a real person lived here. "That's sad," she said honestly. "I know." She turned to face him. You deserve better than this, Sebastian. You deserve a real home, a real life. I'm starting to think you might be right. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You make me want things I'd given up on, Clara. Like what? Like happiness. Like a future that isn't just board meetings and charity galas. He hesitated. Like love. Clara's breath caught. They hadn't said that word yet. They'd been dancing around it for weeks, but neither of them had been brave enough to say it out loud. Sebastian, I know it's too soon. I know we've only known each other for a few weeks. But I think I'm falling in love with you, Clara. And it scares the hell out of me. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. It scares me too. Does that mean... It means I'm falling for you too? She laughed, wiping her eyes. God, we're a mess. Sebastian pulled her into his arms. The best kind of mess. He kissed her and Clara melted into him. For a long moment, nothing else existed. Just the two of them, suspended above the city, two broken people finding something whole in each other. But even as she lost herself in the kiss, a small voice in the back of Clara's mind whispered a warning. This was too good to be true. Something would go wrong. It always did. She just didn't know how right she was. The next morning, Clara arrived at the bakery to find Mrs. Antonelli in tears. What happened? Clara rushed to the old woman's side. Are you okay? Mrs. Antonelli handed her a letter. Clara read it and her heart sank. It was from the landlord. The bakery was 3 months behind on rent. They had 30 days to pay in full or they would be evicted. I thought we were catching up, Clara said, her voice shaking. So did I. Mrs. Antonelli wiped her eyes. But the repairs last month, the new oven, it ate up everything we had saved. Clara did the math in her head. 3 months of rent, plus the late fees, plus the cost of the repairs they still owed for. They needed over $40,000. They didn't have it. They couldn't get it. The bakery was going to close. Clara thought about Sebastian, about his billions of dollars. He could solve this problem with pocket change. He probably wouldn't even notice the money missing. But she couldn't ask him. She wouldn't. She had told him she wasn't interested in his money, and she meant it. She would not become another person who saw him as a bank account, even if it meant losing everything. We'll figure something out, Clara said, putting on a brave face. There has to be a way. But as she tied on her apron and started the morning prep, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to fall apart. And she had no idea how bad things were about to get. What did you think of Clara and Sebastian's growing connection? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories. Clara threw herself into saving the bakery. She picked up extra shifts. She started a GoFundMe campaign. She reached out to every food blogger and local journalist she could find, trying to drum up publicity. She even considered selling her mother's wedding ring, the only valuable thing she owned. Sebastian noticed something was wrong almost immediately. You seem distracted, he said one evening, watching her stare blankly at a menu. They were at a small Italian restaurant, but Clara had barely touched her food. I'm fine. Just tired. Clara. He reached across the table and took her hand. Talk to me. She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But telling Sebastian about the bakery meant admitting she was in financial trouble, and she knew what would happen next. He would offer to help. He would write a check without even thinking about it. And then she would become exactly what she'd promised him she wasn't. It's work stuff, she said, which wasn't technically a lie. Nothing you need to worry about. Sebastian studied her face for a long moment. She could tell he didn't believe her, but he didn't push. If you ever want to talk about it, he said finally, I'm here. I know. She squeezed his hand. Thank you. Over the next week, Clara worked herself to exhaustion. She opened the bakery at 5 a.m. and didn't leave until after 9 p.m. She baked constantly, trying to increase sales, trying to bring in more money. It wasn't enough. The GoFundMe raised $3,000. A local food blogger wrote a nice piece about the bakery, which brought in a few new customers, but they were still $35,000 short, and the deadline was approaching fast. Mrs. Antonelli could see the toll it was taking. You need to rest, child, the old woman said, finding Clara slumped over the prep table at 6 a.m. You're going to make yourself sick. I can't rest. We have to save the bakery. Not at the cost of your health. Mrs. Antonelli sat down beside her. Clara, I've been in business for 40 years. I've survived recessions and competition and everything in between. If this is truly the end, then we'll face it with dignity. I won't let it be the end. Clara's voice cracked. This place is your life. It's my life. I can't just give up. Then at least let me help carry the burden. Mrs. Antonelli placed a weathered hand on Clara's cheek. You're not alone, child. You never have been. Clara broke down crying. The stress of the past weeks, the fear of losing everything, the exhaustion of pretending to be okay, it all came pouring out. Mrs. Antonelli held her and let her cry. What neither of them knew was that their conversation was about to become very relevant. Because on the other side of the city, someone was making plans for Clara Bennett. Margaret Cross sat in the parlor of her Lake Forest mansion, a cup of tea growing cold in her hand. Across from her sat Vanessa Aldridge, looking as polished and beautiful as ever. Thank you for seeing me, Mrs. Cross, Vanessa said, crossing her legs elegantly. Thank you for reaching out. I've been concerned about Sebastian's situation. Vanessa smiled thinly. You mean his infatuation with the bakery girl? I mean his complete abandonment of everything our family stands for. Margaret set down her teacup with a sharp clink. He skipped the Ashford dinner. He's been absent from board meetings. He spends his time in some filthy kitchen learning to make bread. It's embarrassing, Vanessa agreed. Sebastian Cross covered in flour like a common laborer. Something must be done. Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes glittering. I have some ideas, but I'll need your support. You have it. Margaret's expression was cold. Whatever it takes to end this disaster. The two women spent the next hour strategizing. By the time Vanessa left, they had a plan. Clara Bennett was about to find out what it meant to cross the Cross family. The invitation arrived 3 days later. Clara was at her apartment enjoying a rare afternoon off when a courier knocked on her door. He handed her an envelope made of heavy cream paper with her name written in elegant calligraphy. Inside was a card. Mrs. Margaret Cross requests the pleasure of your company for lunch. Tomorrow, 12 noon. The Cross Estate, Lake Forest. Car will be provided. Clara stared at the invitation, her heart pounding. Sebastian's mother wanted to meet her. She called Sebastian immediately. My mother invited you to lunch? He sounded confused. She didn't mention anything to me. Is that bad? I don't know. There was worry in his voice. My mother doesn't do anything without a reason. Let me talk to her. Should I go? Sebastian was quiet for a moment. It might be good if you did. She's going to meet you eventually. Better to get it over with. You make it sound like a root canal. Some root canals are less painful than my mother. Clara laughed nervously. That's reassuring. I'll try to find out what she's planning. But Clara, he paused. Be careful. My mother can be manipulative. I can handle myself. I know you can. That's one of the things I love about you. Clara's breath caught. There was that word again. Love. They'd both admitted they were falling, but neither had said it outright since that night at his penthouse. I'll be fine, she said. It's just lunch. But as she hung up, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that it was going to be much more than that. The car arrived at exactly 11:30 the next morning. Clara had agonized over what to wear, finally settling on a simple navy dress that Denise swore was classy but not trying too hard. She'd done her own makeup this time, keeping it natural. She wanted to look like herself, not some polished version she couldn't maintain. The drive to Lake Forest took 45 minutes. As the car turned onto a long, tree-lined driveway, Clara's jaw dropped. The Cross estate was massive, a sprawling manor house that looked like something out of a period drama, surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens and what appeared to be actual peacocks wandering the grounds. "Is this a house or a museum?" Clara muttered to herself. A butler met her at the door and led her through halls lined with oil paintings and antique furniture. Finally, they reached a sunlit conservatory where Margaret Cross was waiting. Sebastian's mother was elegant in a terrifying way. Silver hair perfectly styled, impeccable makeup, a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Clara's entire wardrobe. She rose as Clara entered, extending a hand with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Miss Bennett, how lovely to meet you. Mrs. Cross, thank you for the invitation. Please, sit." Margaret gestured to a chair across from her. A spread of tiny sandwiches and pastries had been laid out on a table between them. "Tea?" "Yes, please." Margaret poured with practiced grace. Clara accepted the delicate cup, trying not to let her hands shake. "I'm sure you're wondering why I asked you here," Margaret began. The thought crossed my mind. "I'll be direct, Miss Bennett. I've always believed in honesty." Margaret's smile sharpened. "I know who you are. I know about your situation." Clara's stomach tightened. "My situation? Your father, Raymond Bennett, convicted of embezzlement, served 8 years in federal prison." Margaret took a sip of her tea. "Your mother deceased. Your current financial status precarious at best. You work in a bakery that's about to be evicted for non-payment of rent." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "How do you know all that?" "I make it my business to know everything about the people in my son's life." Margaret set down her cup. "Especially those who might be taking advantage of him." "I'm not taking advantage of Sebastian." "Aren't you?" Margaret's voice was silk over steel. "A woman of your circumstances, suddenly attached to one of the wealthiest men in the country? You'll forgive me if I'm skeptical of your motives." Clara's shock was giving way to anger. "I didn't know who Sebastian was when I met him. I got into his car by accident." "So I've heard. A charming story, almost too charming." Margaret leaned forward. "Miss Bennett, I'm going to make this simple for you. I want you to end this relationship." "Excuse me? You're not right for Sebastian. You never will be. You come from nothing. Your family is a disgrace. You have no education, no connections, nothing to offer except a pretty face and a sad story." Clara stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't have to listen to this. Sit down." Margaret's voice cracked like a whip. "I'm not finished." Something in her tone made Clara pause. Against her better judgment, she sat. Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. She placed it on the table between them. "There's a check in there for $500,000, more than enough to save your precious bakery and set you up for life." Her eyes bore into Clara's. "Take the money, walk away from my son, and we'll never speak of this again." Clara stared at the envelope. $500,000, it would solve everything. The bakery, her mother's medical debt, Sophia's education. Wait, she didn't have a daughter named Sophia. That was a different story. Clara shook her head, trying to focus. The bakery, Mrs. Antonelli, her own future, all of it could be secured with a single check. All she had to do was give up Sebastian. No. The word came out stronger than Clara expected. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "I'm sorry?" I said no. Clara stood again, this time with purpose. "I'm not for sale, Mrs. Cross. I don't want your money." "Everyone wants money, Miss Bennett. Not me. Not like this." Clara's voice was shaking, but she refused to back down. "I care about your son. Really care about him. Not because he's rich. Because he's kind and funny and broken in ways that I understand. Because he looks at me like I'm actually worth something. Pretty words. But words don't pay bills. Maybe not, but they mean something." Clara grabbed her purse. "Thank you for the tea, Mrs. Cross. I'll show myself out." She was halfway to the door when Margaret spoke again. "You'll regret this, Miss Bennett. I always get what I want. And I want you gone." Clara turned back, meeting the older woman's gaze. "Then I guess we're both going to be disappointed." She walked out of the conservatory, through the marble halls, past the portraits of generations of crosses who looked down at her with cold, judging eyes. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking. But she didn't regret a thing. The car drove her back to the city in silence. Clara stared out the window, replaying the conversation in her mind. Sebastian's mother had tried to buy her off, had called her family a disgrace, had made it clear that Clara would never be good enough. Part of her wanted to call Sebastian immediately to tell him everything, but another part hesitated. What if he took his mother's side? What if, deep down, he agreed that Clara wasn't good enough? What if this was the thing that finally made him see her the way everyone else did, as a poor girl from nowhere reaching above her station? By the time she got home, Clara had decided not to say anything. Not yet. She needed time to think. But time was something she didn't have. That evening, Sebastian showed up at her apartment unannounced. "My mother called," he said as soon as Clara opened the door. His face was dark with anger. "She told me what she did." Clara felt her heart sink. "Sebastian, she tried to pay you off. She insulted you. She threatened you." He was pacing now, running his hands through his hair. "I can't believe she would do this. Actually, no, I can believe it. It's exactly the kind of thing she would do." "Sebastian, calm down." "I'm not going to calm down." He spun to face her. "She had no right. No right to treat you like that. You are the best thing that's ever happened to me, and she tried to drive you away like you're nothing." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "She said some pretty awful things." "I know. She told me everything. Bragged about it, actually. Thought I'd be impressed." Sebastian's laugh was bitter. "She was surprised when I told her I was cutting off contact." "You did what?" "I told her that if she can't respect the woman I love, then she's not welcome in my life." Clara's breath caught. "You said that?" "I said more than that, but that was the gist." Sebastian stepped closer, taking her hands. "Clara, I meant what I said before. I'm falling in love with you. No, scratch that. I'm already there. I love you completely. And I'm not going to let my mother or anyone else come between us." Clara was crying now. "I love you too. I was afraid to say it. Afraid that you'd realize I wasn't good enough. That you'd see what everyone else sees." "What does everyone else see? A poor girl with a criminal father and a dead mother and no future." Sebastian cupped her face in his hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "You know what I see. I see a woman who works harder than anyone I've ever met, who cares about people so deeply it hurts, who makes the most incredible pastries I've ever tasted, who got into my car by accident and turned my entire world upside down." He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. "I see the love of my life," he whispered, "and I'm never letting go." They held each other for a long time, standing in the doorway of Clara's tiny apartment. The city noise filtered up from the street below, but in that moment nothing else existed. There's something else, Clara said, finally pulling back. About the bakery. What about it? She took a deep breath and told him everything. The back rent, the eviction notice, the desperate attempts to save it, the fact that she was about to lose everything. Sebastian listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. Because I didn't want to be another person who saw you as a solution to my problems. Clara, he shook his head. That's exactly why I love you. Because you didn't ask. I'm not asking now either. I just wanted you to know. And if I offered to help, Clara hesitated, I'd say no. This is my problem. I need to solve it myself. Sebastian looked at her with something like wonder. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. Is that a compliment? It's absolutely a compliment. He kissed her again, deeper this time. Clara melted into him, letting go of the fear and the stress and the uncertainty. Whatever happened with the bakery, she had Sebastian. And right now, that felt like enough. But across the city, in the elegant offices of a public relations firm, Vanessa Aldridge was putting the finishing touches on a plan. Margaret's bribe hadn't worked. Fine. They would move to phase 2. She picked up her phone and called a number she'd used before. I need you to dig up everything you can on Clara Bennett, she said. And her father, Raymond. I want to know every skeleton in every closet. The voice on the other end confirmed the assignment. Vanessa smiled and hung up. Clara Bennett had no idea what was coming, but she was about to find out. 1 week later, Clara woke up to her phone buzzing incessantly. She grabbed it, squinting at the screen. 23 missed calls, 47 text messages. Her voicemail was full. What the hell? She opened her texts. The first one was from Denise. Don't look at the news. Call me immediately. The second was from Sebastian. I just saw. I'm coming over. Don't talk to anyone. The third was from a number she didn't recognize. Miss Bennett, this is Channel 7 News. We'd like to give you a chance to comment on the story. Please call us back at your earliest convenience. Clara's blood ran cold. She opened her browser and typed her name into the search bar. The headlines made her want to throw up. Billionaire's new girlfriend, daughter of convicted felon. Gold digger or genuine love. The truth about Sebastian Cross's mystery woman. Like father, like daughter. Clara Bennett's criminal connections. The articles were vicious. They painted her father's crimes in the worst possible light. They implied that Clara had inherited his tendency for fraud. They suggested that her relationship with Sebastian was a long con, a scheme to access his fortune. There were photos, old photos of her father being led away in handcuffs. Photos of her at the bakery looking tired and disheveled. Photos of her and Sebastian together, captioned with snide comments about her obvious gold digging. Clara's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Mrs. Antonelli. Clara, something happened at the bakery. You need to come now. Clara threw on clothes and raced out of her apartment. The 20-minute walk to the bakery took her 15, her heart pounding the whole way. When she arrived, she stopped dead. The front window had been smashed. Spray paint covered the brick walls. Gold digger, fraud. Go back to prison like your daddy. Mrs. Antonelli was standing in front of the ruined storefront, tears streaming down her face. A police officer was taking her statement. Mrs. A, Clara ran to the old woman. Are you okay? What happened? Someone did this last night, Mrs. Antonelli said, her voice trembling. The window, the graffiti, they broke in and destroyed the display cases too. Clara looked through the smashed window. The inside of the bakery was trashed, pastries ground into the floor. Equipment overturned, their small, perfect sanctuary violated. Who would do this? Clara whispered, but she already knew the answer. Her phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. I warned you that you'd regret it. This is just the beginning. MC. Margaret Cross. Clara showed the text to the police officer, who noted it down with a skeptical expression. Ma'am, unless you have concrete proof that this person vandalized your property, there's not much we can do. It's a direct threat. It's a vague message that could mean anything. I'm sorry, but my hands are tied. Clara wanted to scream, but before she could respond, her phone rang. It was Sebastian. Where are you? He asked immediately. I went to your apartment, but you weren't there. I'm at the bakery. Someone vandalized it. Sebastian, it was your mother. She sent me a text. There was a long pause. I'm on my way. Sebastian arrived 20 minutes later, his face pale with fury. He took one look at the destroyed bakery and pulled Clara into his arms. I'm so sorry, he said into her hair. This is my fault. I should have... It's not your fault. Clara pulled back to look at him. Your mother did this. She's the one responsible. I know. And I'm going to make her pay. But even as he said it, Clara knew that things were about to get much, much worse. Over the next few days, the attacks continued. The landlord called Mrs. Antonelli and told her that unless she evicted Clara, he would terminate the bakery's lease immediately. Someone had pressured him. He wouldn't say who. Clara's co-workers at the bakery started avoiding eye contact. One of them, a young woman named Jessica, finally admitted what was happening. People are talking, Jessica said, not meeting Clara's eyes. They're saying you're using Mrs. A, that you're going to bring the bakery down with your scandal. That's ridiculous. I know, but... Jessica shrugged helplessly. People believe what they read. Clara went home that night and cried until she couldn't cry anymore. Sebastian called her constantly, but she couldn't bring herself to answer. Every time she talked to him, she felt worse. His world was destroying hers, and there was nothing either of them could do about it. Finally, at midnight, there was a knock on her door. It was Sebastian. He looked exhausted. You haven't been answering my calls. I know. I'm sorry, I just... Clara stepped back to let him in. I don't know what to do anymore. Clara, we can fight this. I have lawyers. I have resources. I can make this go away. Can you? Clara sank onto the couch. Your mother has resources too. And she's made it very clear that she's not going to stop until I'm gone. Then we'll fight her together. How? Clara looked up at him, her eyes red from crying. Sebastian, look at what's happening. The bakery is destroyed. Mrs. Antonelli might lose her business because of me. My reputation is in shreds. Every day there's a new article, a new attack, a new reminder that I don't belong in your world. You belong with me. That's all that matters. Is it? Clara's voice cracked. Because right now, being with you is ruining my life. Sebastian flinched like she'd slapped him. I didn't mean it like that, Clara said quickly. I'm so tired, Sebastian. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of being attacked. I'm tired of feeling like I'm not good enough. Sebastian sat down beside her and took her hands. You're more than good enough. You're everything. Then why does it feel like I'm losing? He didn't have an answer. They sat in silence for a long time, holding hands in the dim light of Clara's apartment. Finally, Clara spoke. Maybe your mother is right. Sebastian's head snapped up. What? Maybe I should walk away. Maybe this is too hard. Maybe... No. Sebastian's voice was firm. Absolutely not. Sebastian, I am not giving up on us because my mother is a vindictive narcissist. He gripped her hands tighter. Clara, I love you. I love you more than I've ever loved anything. And I will burn down everything I have before I let anyone take you from me. Clara stared at him, seeing the fierce determination in his eyes. You mean that? With every fiber of my being. She took a shaky breath. Okay. Okay, we'll fight together. Clara squeezed his hands. But Sebastian, if this destroys me... It won't. I won't let it. He pulled her into his arms. I promise, Clara, whatever happens, we face it together. She wanted to believe him, she really did. But as she fell asleep in his arms that night, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. And somewhere across the city, Vanessa Aldridge was smiling at her computer screen. Phase 2 was complete. Clara was breaking. Now it was time for Phase 3, the final blow. What did you think of Margaret's attack on Clara and the escalating crisis? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories. The days following the vandalism blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and despair. Clara helped Mrs. Antonelli clean up the bakery, scrubbing spray paint from bricks until her hands were raw. They boarded up the broken window with plywood. They salvaged what equipment they could. They tried to reopen. But the customers didn't come. Word had spread. The tabloid stories had done their damage. People who had been regulars for years suddenly had other places to be. The few who did come looked at Clara with suspicion, as if she might steal their wallets the moment they turned around. They'll come back, Mrs. Antonelli said, trying to stay positive. They just need time. But they both knew time was something they didn't have. The eviction deadline was in 2 weeks. They were still $30,000 short, and with business down to a trickle, they were falling further behind every day. Sebastian tried to help in every way Clara would allow. He showed up at the bakery with cleaning supplies. He contacted his lawyers about the vandalism. He even tried to track down the source of the tabloid leaks, though so far he'd hit dead ends. But there was one thing Clara wouldn't let him do. I'm not taking your money, she said for the 100th time. They were sitting in her apartment, takeout containers scattered around them. Sebastian, I mean it. It's not charity, it's an investment. The bakery is a good business, with proper funding. No. Clara's voice was firm. If I take your money, I become exactly what everyone says I am. A gold digger. Someone who's only with you for what you can give me. That's ridiculous. You know that's not true. I know, but the rest of the world doesn't. Clara reached across the table and took his hand. I need to do this myself. I need to prove that I can survive without your money. Sebastian looked at her with a mixture of frustration and admiration. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. He pulled her close and kissed her, and for a moment Clara let herself forget about everything else. The bakery, the tabloids, the looming eviction. But reality always came crashing back. That night after Sebastian left, Clara sat alone in her apartment staring at the bills spread across her kitchen table. She had $847 in her checking account. Her credit cards were maxed out. She had nothing left to sell except her mother's wedding ring, and she couldn't bring herself to part with that. For the first time in her life, Clara Bennett felt truly hopeless. Her phone buzzed. A text from Denise. Turn on Channel 5 now. Clara grabbed the remote and flipped to the local news. A perfectly coiffed anchor was speaking into the camera with a grave expression. Exclusive interview with Vanessa Aldridge, the ex-fiancée of billionaire Sebastian Cross. Aldridge claims to have evidence that Cross's new girlfriend, Clara Bennett, has been running a long-term con on the tech mogul. Clara's blood ran cold. The screen cut to Vanessa sitting in what looked like a designer living room, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I didn't want to come forward, Vanessa said, her voice trembling with fake emotion. But I couldn't stay silent while Sebastian is being taken advantage of. The interviewer leaned forward. What kind of evidence do you have? I've obtained documents showing that Clara Bennett's father wasn't just an embezzler. He was part of a larger criminal network. And Clara was involved. Clara felt like she was going to be sick. I have bank records, Vanessa continued, showing payments from Raymond Bennett to Clara over the past several years, payments that she's never reported to the IRS. It appears that Clara has been living off her father's stolen money while pretending to be a struggling bakery worker. That's a lie, Clara shouted at the television, but no one could hear her. The interview continued, Vanessa spinning a web of lies and half-truths that made Clara sound like a master criminal. She implied that Clara had targeted Sebastian specifically, that the wrong car meeting had been planned, that everything was part of an elaborate scheme. By the time it was over, Clara was shaking. Her phone was blowing up, texts from friends, from co-workers, from numbers she didn't recognize. Sebastian had called 12 times. She couldn't answer. She couldn't talk to anyone. She could barely breathe. There was a knock on her door. Clara opened it to find Sebastian standing there, his face pale. I saw the interview, he said. Clara, none of that is true, right? Of course it's not true, Clara's voice cracked. I haven't spoken to my father in 14 years. I've never received a penny from him. Then where did those bank records come from? I don't know. They must be fake. Clara was crying now. Sebastian, you have to believe me. I'm not a con artist. I'm not a criminal. I'm just a pastry chef who got into the wrong car. Sebastian pulled her into his arms. I believe you. Of course I believe you. Then why did you ask? He was quiet for a moment. Because I needed to hear you say it. I needed to know that my instincts weren't wrong. Clara pulled back, wiping her eyes. Your instincts? From the moment I met you, I knew you were different, real, honest. Sebastian cupped her face in his hands. I trust you, Clara, completely, and I'm going to prove that everything Vanessa said is a lie. How? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. He stayed with her that night, holding her while she cried herself to sleep. But even with his arms around her, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that everything was falling apart. The next morning brought more chaos. The tabloids had picked up Vanessa's story and run with it. Clara's face was everywhere, accompanied by headlines like "Con Artist Caught" and "Gold Digger Exposed." Her phone rang constantly. Reporters camped outside her building. She couldn't leave her apartment without being photographed and shouted at. Mrs. Antonelli called in tears. The landlord had terminated the bakery's lease effective immediately. They had 48 hours to vacate. He said he can't have a criminal business in his building, Mrs. Antonelli sobbed. Clara, I've been in that space for 30 years. It's my home. I know, Mrs. A. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. It's not your fault, child. You didn't do anything wrong. But Clara wasn't so sure anymore. Maybe she had done something wrong. Maybe getting involved with Sebastian had been a mistake from the start. Maybe she should have listened to her instincts and stayed in her own world. That afternoon, Sebastian called with news. I've been digging into those bank records Vanessa mentioned, he said. I hired a forensic accountant to analyze them. And? They're forgeries, good ones, but definitely fake. The account numbers don't match any real accounts. The routing numbers are for banks that don't exist. Clara felt a surge of relief. So we can prove they're fake? Yes, but there's more. Sebastian's voice hardened. The forensic accountant traced the origin of the documents. They were created on a computer, registered to Aldridge PR. Vanessa's company? Exactly, she manufactured the evidence herself. Clara's relief turned to fury. That witch. She made it all up. She's going to pay for this. My lawyers are already preparing a defamation lawsuit, and I'm going to make sure every news outlet that ran this story prints a retraction. Will that be enough? It's a start. Sebastian paused. But Clara, there's something else. Something I didn't want to tell you. What? My mother has been in contact with Vanessa. They've been coordinating this whole thing together. Clara closed her eyes. She'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed still hurt. Your own mother, she said quietly. How could she do this? Because she's incapable of seeing me as anything other than an extension of herself. My happiness doesn't matter to her. Only the family image, only control. Sebastian, I can't let you destroy your relationship with your mother because of me. My relationship with my mother was destroyed long before you came along. She just never let me see it. That evening, Clara made a decision. She couldn't hide anymore. She couldn't let Vanessa and Margaret control the narrative. She needed to fight back. But she couldn't do it with Sebastian's resources. She needed to do it herself. She sat down at her laptop and started writing. The blog post took her 3 hours to complete. She titled it, My Story in My Own Words. She wrote about her childhood, about her father's arrest, and how it had devastated her family. About her mother working 2 jobs to keep them afloat, about putting herself through culinary school, about building a life from nothing. She wrote about meeting Sebastian, the real story, not the tabloid version. The wrong car, the rant, the unexpected connection, falling in love despite every reason not to. She wrote about Margaret's bribe, about the vandalism, about Vanessa's lies. She didn't hold back. She named names and provided details, and at the end she wrote something she hadn't planned to write. I love Sebastian Cross. Not because he's rich, not because he can solve my problems. I love him because he's kind and generous, and he looks at me like I'm the most important person in the world. I love him because when I got into his car by accident, he didn't see a poor girl who didn't belong. He saw me. If that makes me a gold digger, then I guess I'm a gold digger. But I'd rather be a gold digger who knows what love is than a socialite who only knows what money is. I'm not going anywhere, I'm not giving up, and I'm not letting anyone else tell my story. She hit publish and went to bed. By morning, the post had gone viral. Clara woke up to thousands of notifications. The post had been shared tens of thousands of times. It was being picked up by legitimate news outlets. People were rallying to her defense. Her phone rang. It was Sebastian. Clara, have you seen what's happening? I just woke up. What's going on? Your post, it's everywhere. People are calling for boycotts of Vanessa's PR firm. They're demanding that my mother be investigated for harassment. The whole narrative is flipped. Clara sat up in bed, her heart racing. Really? Really? And there's more. A journalist from the Tribune called me. They've been investigating Vanessa and my mother for weeks. Apparently, they've found evidence of other women who've been targeted by similar campaigns. Other women? Women my mother didn't approve of. Women Vanessa saw as competition. This isn't the first time they've done this, Clara. It's just the first time someone has fought back. Clara felt something shift inside her. For weeks, she'd felt like a victim, helpless, powerless. But she wasn't powerless. She had a voice. And people were listening. What do we do now? She asked. Now we finish this together. That afternoon, Clara got a call she never expected. Miss Bennett, this is Detective Rodriguez with the Chicago Police Department. I'm calling about the vandalism at Sweet Surrender Bakery. Clara's heart leaped. Did you find something? We did. We were able to pull fingerprints from the spray paint cans. They match a man named Derek Simmons, small-time criminal, for hire. For hire? He admitted that someone paid him to vandalize the bakery. He was given specific instructions about what to write on the walls. Who paid him? That's where it gets interesting. The payment came through a shell company, but we traced it back to its source. The detective paused. Margaret Cross. Clara couldn't speak. We've issued an arrest warrant, the detective continued. Mrs. Cross is being brought in for questioning as we speak. And Vanessa Aldridge? We're looking into her involvement as well. If what you've told us is true, she could be facing charges for fraud and defamation. Clara thanked the detective and hung up, her hands shaking. It was over. It was actually over. She called Sebastian immediately. They arrested your mother, she said. There was a long silence. I know. Her lawyer just called me. Sebastian, I'm so sorry. I know she's your mother and don't apologize. His voice was tired but steady. She did this to herself. She hurt you. She hurt Mrs. Antonelli. She hurt who knows how many other people. She needs to face the consequences. Are you okay? I will be. He paused. Are you? Clara thought about it. She thought about everything she'd been through in the past few weeks. The attacks, the accusations, the fear that she wasn't good enough, would never be good enough. And then she thought about Sebastian, about the way he'd stood by her through all of it. About the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Yeah, she said finally. I think I am. 3 days later, Clara stood in front of what used to be Sweet Surrender Bakery. The space was empty now. Mrs. Antonelli had been forced to move out before they could fight the eviction. 40 years of memories packed into boxes and hauled away. It broke Clara's heart. But as she stood there staring at the boarded-up windows, she felt someone come up beside her. It was Sebastian. I have something for you, he said. He handed her an envelope. Clara opened it, frowning. Inside was a lease agreement for a commercial space on Michigan Avenue, one of the most prestigious addresses in the city. Sebastian, what is this? It's your bakery. Clara stared at him. What? I bought the building, the whole building, and I want you to have the ground floor for your bakery. Sebastian, I told you I can't take your money. You're not taking my money. He took her hands. This is a business investment. I've seen the numbers. I know what Sweet Surrender was earning before all this happened. With proper location and marketing, you could triple that. But, Clara, let me finish. He squeezed her hands. I'm not giving you this space. I'm renting it to you at a fair market rate, which you'll pay back as the business grows. Mrs. Antonelli will be your partner. You'll hire staff. You'll build something real. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. You did all this? I did all this because I love you. Because I believe in you. Because you deserve a chance to build the life you've always dreamed of. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Clara looked at the lease in her hands, at the address on Michigan Avenue, at the man standing in front of her who had fought for her when everyone else had abandoned her. Yes, she whispered. Yes. Sebastian pulled her into his arms and kissed her right there on the sidewalk in front of the boarded-up bakery. When they finally pulled apart, Clara was laughing through her tears. You know, this all started because I got into the wrong car. Best mistake of my life, Sebastian said. Mine too? They stood there for a long moment, holding each other, looking at the future. It wouldn't be easy. There was still a trial to get through, still media attention to manage, still 1,000 obstacles to overcome. But they would face it together. And that, Clara realized, was all that mattered. 1 month later, Margaret Cross pleaded guilty to harassment charges and was sentenced to community service and a hefty fine. Vanessa Aldridge's PR firm collapsed after multiple clients pulled their accounts. She was facing civil lawsuits from 3 other women her firm had targeted. The The tabloids that had attacked Clara printed retractions and apologies. Some of them even ran follow-up pieces about her resilience and determination. Clara didn't read any of them. She was too busy. The new bakery was taking shape. Clara and Mrs. Antonelli spent every day at the Michigan Avenue location, planning the layout, ordering equipment, testing recipes. "It's going to be beautiful," Mrs. Antonelli said, looking around the empty space with wonder in her eyes. "More beautiful than I ever imagined. We're going to call it Clara's Kitchen," Clara said, "after my mother's recipes." "Perfect," Mrs. Antonelli squeezed her hand. "Your mother would be so proud." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I hope so." That evening, Sebastian came to inspect the progress. He walked through the space, nodding approvingly at the plans Clara had spread out on a folding table. "This is going to be incredible," he said. "I have a good business partner." Clara wrapped her arms around him. "Thank you for everything." "You don't have to keep thanking me." "I know, but I want to." She looked up at him. "Sebastian, I love you. I don't think I say it enough." "You say it plenty." He kissed her forehead. "But I never get tired of hearing it." They stood in the empty space that would soon be Clara's dream, holding each other as the sun set outside the windows. It had been a hell of a journey. Wrong cars and billionaires, scandals and accusations, betrayals and redemptions. But Clara wouldn't change a single moment, because every step had led her here, to this place, to this man, to this life she was building. And it was more than she'd ever dared to dream. What did you think of Clara's fight back against Vanessa and Margaret? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories. 6 months had passed since the darkest days of Clara's life. Now, standing in the doorway of Clara's kitchen on its grand opening day, she could barely believe how much had changed. The bakery was everything she had ever dreamed of. Warm, honey-colored walls, vintage display cases filled with pastries that glistened like jewels, the scent of fresh bread and brewing coffee filling the air, a chalkboard menu featuring her mother's recipes lovingly recreated and refined. Outside, a line of customers stretched down the block. "Clara!" Mrs. Antonelli called from behind the counter, her face flushed with excitement. "We're almost out of the honey lavender eclairs." "Already? We made 200. And they're almost gone. This is incredible." Clara rushed to the kitchen where 3 assistant bakers were working at full speed. She'd hired them last month, young culinary school graduates who reminded her of herself 10 years ago. Hungry, eager, ready to prove themselves. "More eclairs," she announced. "Double batch. Let's go." The kitchen burst into controlled chaos. Clara fell into the familiar rhythm of baking, her hands moving on autopilot while her mind wandered. 6 months ago, she'd been facing eviction, public humiliation, and the very real possibility of losing everything she'd worked for. Now she was the owner of the hottest new bakery in Chicago, with a waiting list for custom orders that stretched into next year. It still didn't feel real. The morning rush eventually slowed to a steady stream, and Clara finally had a moment to breathe. She stepped out from behind the counter and surveyed her domain. Every table was full, families with children, young couples on dates, business people taking meetings over coffee and croissants. They were laughing, talking, enjoying the food she had made. This was what she'd always wanted. Not just a bakery, but a place where people could be happy. The bell over the door chimed, and Clara looked up to see Sebastian walk in. He was wearing jeans and a casual sweater, his hair slightly wind-blown. He looked nothing like the intimidating billionaire she'd accidentally carjacked all those months ago. He looked like the man she loved. "How's the grand opening going?" he asked, pulling her into a hug. We sold out of eclairs twice. That's my girl. He kissed her forehead. I'm proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. It might have taken longer, but you would have found a way. Sebastian took her hands. Clara, you're the most determined person I've ever met. This success, it's all you. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She'd cried more in the past 6 months than in her entire adult life, but these were happy tears. I love you, she said. I love you too. Sebastian's expression shifted, becoming more serious. Actually, there's something I wanted to talk to you about. Now? We're in the middle of... It can't wait. Clara frowned. Sebastian looked nervous, which was unusual. He was one of the most confident people she knew. What is it? She asked, suddenly worried. Sebastian took a deep breath. Then, to Clara's absolute shock, he dropped to one knee. The bakery went silent. Every customer, every employee, everyone in the room turned to stare. Clara Bennett, Sebastian said, his voice slightly shaky. 8 months ago, you got into my car by mistake and changed my life forever. You showed me what it means to be real. To be honest. To love someone for who they are, not what they have. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a ring, not the enormous diamond Clara might have expected, but a simple band with a modest sapphire surrounded by tiny pearls. This was my grandmother's, Sebastian said. She was the only person in my family who ever loved me without conditions. She would have adored you. Clara's hands flew to her mouth. She couldn't speak. I know we've been through hell together, Sebastian continued. I know there will probably be more challenges ahead. But I also know that I don't want to face any of them without you. He looked up at her, his eyes shining. Clara Elena Bennett, will you marry me? The bakery was absolutely silent. Everyone was holding their breath. Clara looked at this man, this beautiful, broken, wonderful man who had seen her at her worst and loved her anyway. Who had fought for her when the whole world was against her. Who had given her the chance to build her dreams, not by solving her problems, but by believing she could solve them herself. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, yes, of course, yes. Sebastian slid the ring onto her finger and rose to his feet, pulling her into a kiss. The bakery erupted in cheers and applause. Mrs. Antonelli was crying. Denise, who had apparently been hiding in the kitchen, was screaming with joy. Even the customers were clapping and wiping their eyes. When they finally broke apart, Clara was laughing and crying at the same time. You planned this, she accused. You knew I'd be too busy to suspect anything. I may have coordinated with Mrs. Antonelli, Sebastian admitted with a grin. Clara looked at the old woman who was beaming through her tears. You knew? Of course I knew. Who do you think helped him pick the date? Mrs. Antonelli rushed over and hugged them both. I'm so happy for you, my children. So happy. The rest of the day passed in a blur of congratulations and celebration. Customers bought extra pastries to toast the engagement. Local news outlets showed up to cover the story. Clara's face hurt from smiling. By the time the bakery closed, Clara was exhausted but happier than she'd ever been. She and Sebastian sat at one of the small tables, surrounded by the remnants of the day's celebration. The ring on her finger still felt surreal. I can't believe this is my life, Clara said, shaking her head. Believe it. Sebastian reached across the table and took her hand. You earned this, Clara. Every bit of it. We earned it together. He smiled. Together. I like the sound of that. The wedding was held 3 months later in Mrs. Antonelli's garden. It wasn't a grand affair. No celebrity guests, no paparazzi, no society page coverage. Just the people who mattered. Mrs. Antonelli had insisted on hosting, and she had transformed her small backyard into a paradise of flowers and fairy lights. White chairs lined a simple aisle. An archway covered in roses marked where they would exchange vows. Clara got ready in Mrs. Antonelli's bedroom, with Denise fussing over her dress and makeup. "You look incredible," Denise said, stepping back to admire her work. "Like a princess." "I feel like I'm going to throw up." "That's normal. It means you're about to do something life-changing." Clara looked at herself in the mirror. The dress was simple. Ivory silk, flowing lines, nothing too fancy. She'd found it at a vintage shop, just like the green dress she'd worn on her first real date with Sebastian. Her mother's wedding ring hung on a delicate chain around her neck. It was the one thing she'd refused to sell, even in her darkest moments. Now it felt like her mother was there with her. "I wish she could be here," Clara whispered. Denise squeezed her shoulder. "She is. I'm sure of it." There was a knock on the door. Mrs. Antonelli poked her head in. "It's time, child. Your young man is waiting." Clara took a deep breath. "Okay, I'm ready." She walked through the small house and out into the garden where 40 guests sat waiting. She saw Elena from the taqueria dabbing at her eyes. She saw Marcus, Sebastian's driver, looking proud in a new suit. She saw the young bakers from Clara's kitchen grinning and waving. And at the end of the aisle, she saw Sebastian. He was wearing a simple gray suit, his eyes bright with emotion. When he saw her, his face broke into a smile so pure and joyful that Clara felt her heart might burst. Mrs. Antonelli walked her down the aisle. The old woman had gotten ordained online specifically for this occasion. She had insisted on being part of the ceremony, and Clara couldn't imagine it any other way. When they reached the archway, Mrs. Antonelli kissed Clara's cheek and whispered, "Your mother would be so proud." Then she stepped into her position as officiant, smoothing down her best dress. "Dearly beloved," Mrs. Antonelli began, her Italian accent thick with emotion. "We are gathered here today to witness the marriage of two of the best people I have ever known." She looked at Clara, then at Sebastian. "I have watched these two fall in love. I have watched them fight for each other when the world tried to tear them apart. I have watched them build something beautiful together, not just a bakery, but a life." Clara felt tears rolling down her cheeks. Sebastian reached out and gently wiped them away. "Marriage is not easy," Mrs. Antonelli continued. "It requires patience, forgiveness, and a lot of good food." The guests laughed. "But when two people truly love each other, when they see each other clearly and accept each other completely, marriage becomes the greatest gift life can offer." She turned to Sebastian. "Sebastian, do you take Clara to be your wife? To love her, honor her, and cherish her, in sickness and in health, in good times and bad, for as long as you both shall live?" Sebastian looked into Clara's eyes. "I do, with all my heart." Mrs. Antonelli turned to Clara. "Clara, do you take Sebastian to be your husband? To love him, honor him, and cherish him in sickness and in health, in good times and bad, for as long as you both shall live?" Clara smiled through her tears. "I do. Forever." "Then by the power vested in me by the internet," Mrs. Antonelli said, causing another ripple of laughter, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Sebastian, you may kiss your bride." Sebastian pulled Clara into his arms and kissed her, deep and sweet and full of promise. The garden erupted in cheers. When they finally broke apart, Clara whispered, "We did it." "We're just getting started," Sebastian replied. The reception was held right there in the garden, with long tables laden with food that Clara and Mrs. Antonelli had prepared together. There was no fancy catering, no imported champagne, just good, honest food made with love. Denise gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry. Marcus surprised everyone with a heartfelt speech about how Clara had changed Sebastian, made him human again. Elena from the taqueria provided a mountain of tacos that disappeared within the hour. As the evening wore on and the fairy lights twinkled overhead, Clara found herself standing at the edge of the garden watching her guests celebrate. Sebastian came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how different my life is now." Clara leaned back against him. "A year ago, I was working double shifts just to pay my bills. I was lonely and exhausted and convinced that happiness was something that happened to other people. And now?" She turned in his arms to face him. "Now I have everything I ever wanted. A successful business, friends who love me, a husband who looks at me like I'm the most important person in the world." "You are the most important person in the world. My world, anyway." Clara kissed him softly. "How did I get so lucky?" "You got into the wrong car," she laughed. "Best mistake I ever made." They danced together as the moon rose over the garden, surrounded by the people who loved them, finally home. 1 year later, Clara's kitchen had become a Chicago institution. The bakery had expanded twice, taking over the spaces next door. Clara now employed 15 people full-time, including Mrs. Antonelli, who had taken on the role of head baker and mentor to the younger staff. The honey lavender eclairs had become famous, featured in food magazines and on morning talk shows. Clara had turned down 3 offers from corporate investors who wanted to franchise the brand. "Some things shouldn't be mass-produced," she told Sebastian when he asked why she kept refusing. "My mother's recipes deserve to be made with love, not manufactured in a factory." He'd kissed her and told her he was proud of her, and that had been the end of the discussion. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Clara worked at the bakery during the day. Sebastian had started working fewer hours, spending more time on philanthropic projects and more time with his wife. They had dinner together every night, either at home or at one of their favorite hole-in-the-wall restaurants. Sebastian's mother had reached out several times since her conviction. Sebastian had ignored the first few messages, but eventually he'd agreed to meet with her. "She apologized," he told Clara after that first meeting. "Actually apologized. I don't think I've ever heard her say sorry for anything in my life." "Do you believe her?" Sebastian had thought about it for a long time. "I think she's trying. Whether that's enough, I don't know yet." They were taking it slowly. Margaret was on probation, both legally and personally. Clara didn't trust her and probably never would, but she supported Sebastian's decision to try to rebuild some kind of relationship. "Family is complicated," she told him. "Even the terrible parts are still part of who we are." Vanessa Aldridge had disappeared from public life after her PR firm collapsed. Rumor had it she'd moved to Europe, trying to reinvent herself away from the scandal. Clara didn't care. Vanessa was in the past, and Clara was focused on the future. A future that was about to change once again. Clara found out on a Tuesday morning, standing in the bakery bathroom staring at a positive pregnancy test. She didn't tell Sebastian right away. She wanted to be sure. She made an appointment with her doctor, got confirmation, and spent 2 days figuring out how to share the news. In the end, she decided to do it at the place where everything had started. "I have a surprise for you," she told Sebastian that evening. "Can you come somewhere with me?" They drove to the block where Lumiere Restaurant stood, the place where Clara had fled her terrible date with Bradley all those months ago. "Why are we here?" Sebastian asked, confused. Clara pointed to the curb. "That's where your car was parked, the night I got in by mistake." Sebastian smiled. "I remember. I was crying, my mascara was ruined. I'd just poured wine on a man who told me to lose weight." Clara laughed at the memory. "I was convinced my life was falling apart. And instead it was just beginning. Exactly. Clara took his hands. Sebastian, that night changed everything. You changed everything. And now, she took a deep breath. Now everything is about to change again. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small wrapped box. Sebastian frowned, taking it. What's this? Open it. He unwrapped the box carefully and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a tiny pair of baking-themed baby booties with little croissants on them. Sebastian stared at the booties, then at Clara, then back at the booties. Are you... He couldn't finish the sentence. I'm pregnant. Clara was crying now. We're going to have a baby. Sebastian's face went through about 17 emotions in 3 seconds. Shock, disbelief, joy, terror, and finally, overwhelming happiness. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. We're having a baby, he shouted, not caring who heard. We're having a baby. Clara laughed through her tears. They stood there on the sidewalk, holding each other, crying and laughing right where it had all begun. I'm going to be a father, Sebastian said, wonder in his voice. You're going to be an amazing father. How do you know? Clara cupped his face in her hands. Because I've seen how you love. Completely, unconditionally. Our baby is going to be the luckiest child in the world. Sebastian kissed her deep and sweet. I love you, Clara Cross. I love you too, Sebastian Cross. She grinned. Now let's go home. I'm eating for 2 and I'm starving. He laughed and opened the car door for her, the same gesture he'd made the night they met when he'd offered her a ride home from the rain. Some things never changed. 8 months later, on a snowy December morning, Clara gave birth to a healthy baby girl. They named her Elena Rose Cross after the woman at the taqueria who had first shown Clara that Sebastian was more than just a billionaire. Elena Ramirez cried for an hour when she found out. Mrs. Antonelli became the unofficial grandmother, spoiling Elena with homemade cookies before she was old enough to eat solid food. Denise was named godmother and took her responsibilities extremely seriously, filling the nursery with stuffed animals and tiny designer outfits. Sebastian was besotted. He spent hours just watching Elena sleep, marveling at her tiny fingers and toes. He learned to change diapers and give baths and rock her to sleep. He was, as Clara had predicted, an amazing father. The bakery continued to thrive even as Clara took time off for maternity leave. Mrs. Antonelli ran things with an iron fist, ensuring that standards never slipped. This place is your legacy, Mrs. Antonelli told Clara when she worried about being away. But it is not your whole life. Go be with your family. The eclairs will wait. One evening, when Elena was 3 months old, Clara sat in the rocking chair in the nursery, feeding her daughter. Sebastian leaned against the door frame, watching them with soft eyes. What are you thinking? Clara asked. I'm thinking about how different my life is now. He smiled. 1.5 years ago, I was sitting in my car feeling sorry for myself. I'd given up on ever finding real love. I was convinced I'd spend the rest of my life alone. And then I got in your car. And then you got in my car. Sebastian walked over and knelt beside the rocking chair, reaching out to stroke Elena's soft hair. Now I have everything I never knew I wanted. A wife who sees me for who I really am. A daughter who looks at me like I hung the moon. A family that's built on love, not obligation. Clara leaned over and kissed him. Best wrong car ever. The best. He stood and looked out the window at the snowy Chicago night. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd gotten into the right car that night? Sometimes. Clara shifted Elena to her shoulder, patting her back gently. I probably would have gone home, cried myself to sleep and kept working double shifts until I collapsed. And I would have kept sitting in my car feeling sorry for myself. We'd both be miserable. Instead, we're here. Sebastian turned back to face her. Happy. Together. With this perfect little person we created. Elena burped loudly as if to punctuate his statement. Clara laughed. Perfect and gassy. She gets that from you. Excuse me? I'm kidding. Sebastian held up his hands in mock surrender. She's perfect in every way, just like her mother. Clara smiled, looking down at her daughter. At this tiny life that was half her and half Sebastian. At this miracle that had grown from an accident. A wrong turn, a moment of chaos on a rainy night. I used to think my life was a disaster, she said softly. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. My father, my mother's death, the debt. The bakery almost closing. And now I think maybe all of it happened for a reason. Every wrong turn led me exactly where I needed to be. She looked up at Sebastian. Led me to you. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. I love you, Clara. I love you too. Elena had fallen asleep, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. Clara stood carefully and placed her daughter in the crib, tucking the blanket around her. Sebastian wrapped his arms around Clara from behind, and they stood together watching their daughter sleep. Ready for bed? He asked. In a minute. I just want to look at her a little longer. They stayed like that, the three of them, as the snow fell softly outside and the city sparkled below. A family. Built from chaos and courage and love, all because Clara Bennett got into the wrong car. Epilogue. 5 years later. The annual Cross-Bennett family reunion had become a Chicago tradition. Every summer, Clara and Sebastian opened their home to everyone who had become family over the years. Mrs. Antonelli and her relatives, Denise and her husband, they'd met at Clara's wedding. Marcus, the driver, and his grandchildren, Elena Ramirez and her entire extended family, and of course the 3 Cross children. Elena, now 5, was the spitting image of Clara, with wild curly hair and a stubborn streak a mile wide. She'd already declared her intention to be a Baker astronaut princess when she grew up. The twins, Michael and Rose, were 3, a surprise pregnancy that had thrown Clara and Sebastian for a loop, but turned out to be the greatest blessing imaginable. Michael had Sebastian's serious eyes. Rose had Clara's laugh. The backyard was chaos. Children running everywhere, adults laughing and eating and catching up. Tables groaning under the weight of food. Half of it from Clara's kitchen, half of it from Elena's taqueria, all of it delicious. Clara stood on the porch watching the mayhem with a smile. Sebastian came up beside her, handing her a glass of lemonade. Having fun? He asked. Always. She leaned into him. Remember when my life was quiet? Vaguely. Seems like 100 years ago. I don't miss it. Neither do I. Elena came running up, her dress already stained with grass and chocolate. Mommy, Daddy, Nana says it's time for cake. Nana was what the children called Mrs. Antonelli. The old woman had resisted the title at first, but had eventually embraced it with tears of joy. Then we'd better go get some cake, Sebastian said, scooping Elena into his arms. Want a ride? Elena shrieked with laughter as Sebastian carried her toward the dessert table, Clara following with the lemonade. The cake was spectacular, a towering creation of chocolate and strawberries that Mrs. Antonelli had spent 2 days making. Clara had offered to help, but the old woman had shooed her away. This is my gift to you, Mrs. Antonelli had said. Let me do this. Now, as the candles were lit and everyone gathered around, Clara felt a wave of emotion wash over her. This was her family, not bound by blood but by choice, by love, by the 1,000 small moments that had woven their lives together. Speech! Someone shouted. I need Clara's speech. Clara laughed and shook her head. I'm not good at speeches. Yes, you are, Denise yelled. Remember the blog post that went viral? That was different. Speech, speech, speech. The chant grew louder. Clara sighed and held up her hands. Okay, fine. The crowd quieted. Clara looked around at all the faces she loved, at Mrs. Antonelli, who had given her a home when she had none, at Denise, who had been there through everything, at Elena Ramirez, who had fed a struggling young billionaire out of pure kindness, at Marcus, who had driven her home on the night everything changed, and at Sebastian standing beside her with their children, looking at her like she was still the most amazing thing he'd ever seen. I don't really know what to say, Clara began. Except thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of our lives. Thank you for making us a family. She felt tears prick her eyes and didn't try to stop them. 5 years ago, I got into the wrong car. It was raining. I was crying. I just had the worst date of my life. I was sure things couldn't get any worse. She looked at Sebastian. I was wrong. Things got so much better. Not because I found a billionaire. Not because my problems magically disappeared, but because I found someone who saw me, really saw me, who loved me for exactly who I was, not who he thought I should be. Sebastian reached out and took her hand. My mother used to say that the best things in life are accidents, Clara continued. A pinch too much cinnamon, a wrong turn on a familiar road, a stranger's car on a rainy night. She was right, Clara raised her glass. 2 accidents, 2 wrong turns to the beautiful disasters that lead us exactly where we need to be. To family. To family, everyone echoed. They drank. The children attacked the cake. The adults laughed and talked and celebrated. Later, after the guests had left and the children were in bed, Clara and Sebastian sat on the porch swing watching the stars. Good day, Sebastian said. The best. Remember when you thought you'd never see me again after that first night? Clara laughed. I was convinced it was a fever dream. And now look at us. Clara looked at their beautiful home, at the toys scattered across the yard, at the man beside her, graying slightly at the temples but still as handsome as the night she'd met him. Not bad for a wrong car, she said. Not bad at all. He kissed her under the stars, and Clara felt what she'd felt every day since that rainy night in Chicago. Lucky, loved, exactly where she was meant to be. What did you think of Clara and Sebastian's love story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories, and check out more inspiring stories by clicking right here on the screen.